The Florida Gators pick up a huge win in the swamp, pictured behind me, over the LSU Tigers on Saturday, 27-16, getting their bowl hopes back. How do I word this? Revive their bowl ambitions. Welcome, everyone, to the Awkward Sports Podcast. I'm Harrison alongside Josh. And Josh, the highlights. DJ Lagway still looks like the future. The Gator defense had probably one of its best games the entire season. 7 sacks, only 9 missed tackles on about 90 plays when they were on the field for. Third down defense could have been better, but with the way everything looked, not really a lot of complaints. That's fixable. Just a huge statement win in the swamp against a rival. I know LSU is now on a 4-game losing streak, so it's not quite the win it would have been if they had played a month ago, which is I feel like that's when they normally play, is a little bit earlier in the season. But, conference realignment is changing everything. You got to think about it. Could something Actually, we'll have that. I'll ask that question in a moment. Right now, let's just talk the fact that Bull hopes are alive and this team's looking pretty good.
Bull hopes are definitely alive, Harrison, and the swamp was a lot more packed than the one that you see behind you right now. The game was sold out. Obviously, Florida gets up for LSU every time that they play. It's the first time Florida has beaten LSU since 2018. That's one of my all-time personal favorite matchups.
Yeah, I was live at that game.
So was I. My brother ended up going to this one. I watched from afar, but that 2018 one where they beat Burrow and those guys, when a lot of people didn't expect them to do it, that was a big time win. This one, LSU now, on their skid, they've lost their last three. They get Vanderbilt next week, so they could lose their last four. They've been on this skid. You look at Florida, they win this game. The defense has played a lot better outside of that Texas game. This defense has played a lot better after the bye week. They went toe to toe with Tennessee. They went toe to toe with Georgia until DJ Lagway went down. DJ Lagway is 3-1 as a starter. The one that he has a loss in is the game that he didn't finish due to injury. So going back to last offseason, he sent out a tweet. He said, "You either going to win with us or you're going to watch us win." Well, when he's played a complete game as a starter, he's won. He's undefeated every time he has started and finished a game for the Gators. The downfield ball is still there. He's playing off of one leg, and you see some of these plays, Harrison, that just blow you away. The one that I was the most impressed with yesterday was the play where it wasn't even a touchdown. They got down to the 1 yard line. He was under duress. He's obviously limited in his mobility due to the hamstring injury. He steps up like a pro, throws a dart down the field. They get down to the 1 yard line to set up the score. Obviously, Jaden Boss' 55-yard run was the big play of the day and put the Gators ahead for good and put that game away for good. And we'll get to him in a moment. But
Run the ball.
I think it starts with how dynamic DJ Lagway is, even when he is not 100%. This guy has the chance to be, again, like I've said in previous episodes, this guy has the chance to be Florida's first ever #1 pick that comes out of the University of Florida. They had Cam Newton. He ended up going to Auburn, and then he became a #1 pick in the draft. Lagway's got this chance to be a #1 pick right out of the University of Florida if he decides that this is where he wants to spend his remainder of his collegiate years playing college football before he inevitably goes to the NFL. Because this dude at just 19 years old looks like a pro already, winning games despite a lot of the limitations that this Florida offense may have. And we've definitely seen him with him out of the lineup last week against Texas. We saw it with him out of the lineup at the end of the Georgia game. This offense is without a doubt limited. He comes in and elevates everybody around him. And the fact that he's only a freshman and he hasn't even played 10 full games is so incredible to the fact that it just lives up to the hype that he has had coming in, being the #1 overall recruit out of high school as a quarterback.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder just by the time he's obviously next year he's going to take a pretty nice jump forward, but by the time he's a junior, he's in that final season before he goes to the draft. I don't think he's going to play all 4 years
Oh,
with the
no.
way he's playing, nor should he. Nor should he. if he's playing the way he is, he's going to be a consensus first overall pick for about a year and a half and will be taken first overall by whomever that might end up being. I want to make a joke about like the Browns or something, but look, let's be real. The reality is we don't know who's going to tank out of nowhere to get him. No one would have thought the Colts were going to have the first overall pick to take Andrew Luck when that happened. So you never know. Just throwing an example out there that I know you would personally like, because I know you love Peyton Manning. I know you love Andrew Luck.
Yeah, Andrew Luck. Yeah, those guys. Yeah, there was a very few quarterbacks were surefire like Andrew Luck was. Even Peyton Manning, as great as he was, there was some debate at that top spot. I know we're going a little off track, but there was some debate whether it was going to be him or Ryan Leaf out of
Yes,
Washington
that's
State.
true.
Andrew Luck was just a surefire guy. I don't know if we'll ever see. I don't know if we'll ever see somebody come out with that much of a lock. I mean, we saw Trevor Lawrence come
About
out.
to say, Trevor Lawrence was a consensus first overall pick for 2 years.
He was, and he's actually, and what's going on over there is has nothing to do with his struggles. He's actually been playing pretty well if you look at his numbers. But we can go off topic. We can talk about all these elite quarterbacks all day. But one thing's for sure, when we talk about quarterbacks, DJ Lagway in college as a freshman is definitely already among the elite uh, quarterbacks, especially when it comes to throwing the ball downfield. You see those flashes, you see that ability. Now we just like to see if he can stay healthy, if they can actually put, more pieces around him and evolve this offense to allow him to do a little bit more than what he's already been able to do in his early stint here as the quarterback for the University of Florida. We shift over to the running game. We talk about Jaden Ball, right? The 55
Right.
yard touchdown run. Obviously, he had the 5 touchdown game a few weeks back against Kentucky, right there in the swamp as well. The dude has shown flashes of stellar play. Also, a freshman running back. Last season, the Gators had Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne this offseason decides he wants to go and play for University of Georgia. And if you look at the numbers, Harrison, they're identical between Jaden Baugh and Trevor Etienne. Jaden Baugh had 95 carries for 476 yards and 7 touchdowns. And then Trevor Etienne has had 95 carries for 477 yards and 7 touchdowns. So 1 yard difference there. You basically remove a guy like Trevor Etienne, you bring in Jaden Baugh, and he's filled in the exact role that you would like him to fill. We not even to mention guys like Jacoby Jackson and Montrell Johnson, even though having that injury, has still had a little bit of a stake in this offense as well. Florida's had a good committee of running backs this season, and they've been able to find ways to run the ball at times. And obviously, Jaden Ball with the big one in the LSU game, sort of similar. Stakes different, mind you, but sort of similar to the LaMichael Pirine one against Auburn. Obviously, stakes were
The
different,
88-yard touchdown run.
but those, you just get that when you see the swamp just come to life like that. They had all is something that they've been waiting for a long time. Big win for Billy Napier against an SEC rival. Again, Florida had not beaten LSU since 2018.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about that 2018 game for a moment because I thought we might go into it, but we didn't. So I just want to put out a fun fact there for when I was in attendance for the game. So Brad Stewart's pick six. It's one of the most famous moments from the last, 10 years for Florida football. So I was in the opposite end zone for it. So it's like you imagine a major moment happens and you're just watching it going the opposite direction, as far away from you as possible. And that's happened to me twice. I was so Felipe Frank's Hail Mary to Tyree
Oh,
Cleveland.
you're on the other side.
Opposite direction. I was in the opposite end zone. And obviously you can tell with Stewart, like, it's wide open. He's gonna get the touchdown. For Cleveland, I had to wait for the crowd's reaction to know if somebody caught it.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, if you're on the other side, that I was in disbelief. I was watching that one on TV. The 2018 LSU game, I was there though. I was in the student section. So I got a good view of the Brad Stewart one. That was to me one of my actually to me that's my favorite game I've ever attended because all week leading up to the game, I just had this feeling. I was texting one of my friends that I was going to the game with, and I was like, I don't know. Everyone thinks LSU is going to win, but I really think that we can do this. I really think that we're going to win this game. Like I did not have a lot of angst leading up to that game. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't really concerned about this team or that team back in 2018. I felt like they had a chance to go out there and do something special, and they went out there and they did something special. This team, obviously, at this stage of the season, at this point of the season, obviously being fighting for bowl eligibility, the stakes are a little bit different, but it's still nice to get a win against a rival LSU team
Oh
that
yeah.
has had their way with the Gators in the past couple of years. Especially seeing guys come through here like Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, a lot of really good quarterback play. They had Garrett Nussmeier this time around, who is the son of former Florida offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier, and I think he played some of his high school ball down the street in Gainesville at Buchholz High School. I'm pretty sure. Do not know for certain, but he had some nice moments in the game. But ultimately, the story of the game was he was on his back. 7 sacks the Gators defense was responsible for.
Elite showing.
LSU had given up 6 sacks all season. The Gators had 7 in the game yesterday, a standalone game. So when Florida's been able to generate pressure, they've been able to have a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball. Carson Beck threw 3 picks when he was pressured.
It was
So,
almost four. It was
yeah,
almost four inside the 10. Just
yeah,
got out of the reach.
yeah. And it was like, I mean, you see some of the things that Florida does well, and then you just wonder why they can't be more consistent with those things. The pressuring, getting on the quarterback, the offense, being more creative with the play calling, and then ultimately the discipline issues, Harrison. You still saw a ton of that yesterday, where Florida looked to be the less disciplined team
Well,
between
especially in those first 5 minutes, especially four. I think in like what 4 minutes there were four penalties.
it was they had
It
a
was pretty
multiple
bad.
they had multiple face mask penalties, they had false starts, they had holding. Austin Barber, the left tackle, in my opinion, had kind of a rough game when it came to the penalties. But it was just one of those things where it was like whenever there was this one drive in particular, Lagway made a couple of nice throws. They started moving the ball down the field. Then you had a holding. Then you had a false start. Then you had a delay of game. Then they had to take a timeout to prevent it again. And then at that point, they were so backed up, they ended up having to punt the ball. And it was just like you see some of these things that are stalling some of these good drives. These are still things I'm looking to see, especially from this coaching staff, that they got to get buttoned up. We still shouldn't be having these special teams penalties. We shouldn't be having these silly false start offensive penalties, especially when sometimes we do struggle to move the ball. So they have to become a more disciplined team, well-refined team. This is not week 2. This is we're,
No,
we're getting to the
but
first game of the year.
but what does matter? What still is important? And look, fortunately, these things are fixable. That doesn't mean they will get fixed. I just want to point that out. But we do see things getting better. Even the offensive line that had some rough penalties, they're looking a lot better this year. Last year, they allowed 39 sacks. I believe if I got the number correct, it's like 13 now, which is a significant drop. I know Lagway's only been sacked 6 times. I believe Mertz was 4. I just need to confirm the number again for Warner just to make sure that adds up to 13. But still, defense is playing better. O-line's playing better. The young running backs look great. If they could find a way to just look, Napier already has to get a new offensive coordinator. So that's going to be addressed. And someone's going to, you like to think, come in, get a little more creative, change things up because the talent is clearly here now.
It's getting there. It's definitely
It's
getting
getting there. I mean,
there.
like, obviously, like, it
You
could go
like
a little deeper. We
you
learned
like
that with Lagway's injury.
You
But
like it with the running backs. You like it with the QB. Obviously, the question is, how they're going to replace some of those guys on the offensive line. And then, of course, you look at the receiving room. Somebody they were really after last offseason, Jeremiah Smith, stayed true to his commitment at Ohio State. And he has been a stellar piece there as a freshman. So you'd like to see Florida come in and bring in a top tier wide receiver, maybe a tight end. They haven't had an elite one since Kyle Pitts.
no.
Get somebody for him to throw the ball to that is a go-to elite target. So there are definitely places that they can upgrade, but you're right. You start to see some of these young core players that he's brought in have an impact, like Jaden Ball, like Lagway, LJ McCray on the defensive end. You can start to see some of those these freshman players come in for the Gators and make an immediate impact.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder just like if they can clean some of this up, get a better special teams coach, help with the mess we've seen a few times. The one that always sticks out to mind for me is that botched snap in the Georgia game. Again, something that in another situation might have been more easy to overcome, but again, Florida didn't have the quarterback to overcome anything in that game. Even though I know Warren had the touchdown, but you get my points. Could Florida, assuming they're able to play the portal a little bit better this year, we know Napier's sticking around. He might be able to get some more recruits coming in. Could we see them just take that big step forward next year? I'm not saying they're going to go from potentially finishing 6-6 this year and then they're 11-1 next year. I'm saying can they go 9-3? Because we saw how close they was. Let me get this thought one more in. If they go 6-6, think about how they were close with Tennessee. They were close with Georgia. In another scenario, maybe they're 8-4 already with some more talent. I don't know the outcome of Ole Miss, so I'm just going to assume that's a loss right now. But you have to think there's something here. And if they can take that step forward, maybe like a four-loss team, no, but a 9-3 team with the schedule they have next year, and I got it pulled up ready to talk about it, could be an at-large bid in the college football playoff.
It could. I think, and again, I think the main point and the second point I'll get to is more one that I just mentioned about adding more skill position players. But the main thing that I think next season will hinge on, obviously with players being healthy for sure. But the main thing I think that I'm going to need to see is what is the offensive identity of this team going to be? Because what I see right now is I see some exceptional players on this offense. Lagway, Ball. I see exceptional players elevating the product of this offense. I don't necessarily see this offense elevating players that are decent and making them great. I see great players elevating a mediocre offense. A great offense comes in and elevates players as opposed to the opposite. Perfect example being if you look at the way that San Francisco did things with Kyle Shanahan. Christian McCaffrey is a superstar running back. We saw him at Stanford. We saw him with the Carolina Panthers. We knew that this guy was one of the top tier running backs. So when he went to San Francisco, that was a match made in heaven. Before he was there, San Francisco still had a very good running game. San Francisco was running it with a committee of like Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. And I think they had I know they had Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. They had a third guy there in the mix. Most of those guys migrated over to Miami, but they were running the ball very well over in San Francisco with a committee. And then when Christian McCaffrey went over there, you took a great player and a great offense, and you got one of the best seasons that we've seen from a running back that you saw in 2023. I see that potential with some of these players that Florida has. I see that potential with DJ Lagway. He's a spectacular quarterback. You get him the right offense, you get him that offensive coordinator that's a genius OC that's a great play caller. You're looking at a guy that could win a Heisman Trophy. You're looking at Jaden Baugh, who could have a stellar year behind that as well. So I think that that's going to be the big key if Florida is going to want to take a lead.
Absolutely.
They're going to need to find an offense that elevates players because what I see right now is yes, Florida's winning some games. The defense looks very good, but on the offensive side of the ball, it looks to me like these are exceptional players that are kind of making up for what this offense is. We even saw it with Anthony Richardson in his final season, which happened to be Napier's first. You looked at Utah game, right? That viral 2-point play. That wasn't like a great play call. That was Anthony Richardson doing something spectacular with his feet, faking a guy out and making that throw.
And even then, on top of it, too, the game was saved by Amari Burney picking off
Yeah,
Cam Rising in the end zone.
exactly.
But I get your point. It's talented players overcoming what is not a quality system.
Exactly.
But that's why we know Napier has to go get an offensive coordinator in order to save his job. That's part of the mandate. You just have to hope he nails the hire.
You have to hope, right? And it's just like that's where it's like for me at least, I'll believe it when I see it because obviously the guys that he has in now haven't been people that I've necessarily been a big believer of, especially since you look at how Florida's offense just was under the Mullen regime. If there was one thing that Mullen did really well, He was an offensive
Elevated
scheme.
talent.
You saw the way those offenses hummed with like guys like Kyle Trask. And I like Kyle Trask, and Gator fans will love Kyle Trask forever. But there is a talent gap between Kyle Trask and DJ Lagway. This guy is an act like this guy was the number one high school guy for a reason.
No,
Kyle
it's not the
Trask
same.
is like,
Trask was a walk-on who happened to get a scholarship, end up in the right place at the right time and do something special. Lagway is already doing something special and he's exceeding his expectations out of the gate. There is no, Cinderella story here.
and that's your college example. That's your college example of what a great offense is. It elevates players that you may not have thought
Yeah.
were exceptional. Nobody
That's
thought
why I thought it was funny you went to Kyle Shanahan because I'm sitting here thinking, Dan Mullen was the coach here for the 4 years you were in college, right?
and yeah, that's your college one, right? Because Kyle Trask was like Kyle Trask was not an exceptional player coming in. He was a second round draft pick in the NFL, and he hasn't been able to be a starter yet. And like, who knows if he will make it in the NFL? But he waited like 4 years to even get in, and that was an offense that he got to study for a while, and he went out there and crushed it. But it was a good offensive scheme that elevated even Felipe Franks. Felipe Franks under McElwain versus Felipe Franks at the end of his tenure under Dan Mullen was just different, and they ended up winning a New Year's Six Bowl because of it. So, you saw some of the special things that Mullen even did as a coach here at Florida, and even as an offensive coordinator, even way back when. That to me was an exceptional offense. This offense to me looks like there's some really good players that are kind of holding this together.
Right, but that's why I said when presenting the question to you, they're going to get the offensive coordinator. I pretty much acknowledge that this was very much the case. Like, I'm not thinking, Napier's doing some stellar play calling here. Though I will say to his credit, he did do something right to keep the Gators in the game against Georgia, but that's only one game out of how many has he coached at this point? Almost 36.
Yeah, and also another thing that we still have to keep in mind too with the Napier era, got to start winning some of these big games on the road. Yeah, they did beat Kentucky. They beat them at home. They did beat LSU. They beat them at home. They beat Utah in his first game. They won that game at home. Got to start seeing some wins on the roads as well because hey, you're in the SEC. You're going to have to go play in some tough environments. You can't be basically 0-4 against quality opponents
Well,
on the
this season really wasn't a good example to do that. Next year's going to be a
three.
phenomenal one for it.
Yeah, but it's been a 3-year sample size
No, I
too.
know. I'm talking about like for the improvements this year. Yes, of course they got it. But the only chance they really had this year was Tennessee. But look, for next year, they go to Kentucky, they go to Baton Rouge, they go to Oxford, they go to Kyle Field, they go to Miami. That's gonna be a phenomenal test. If the Gators can find a way to pull off some wins and they're doing it on the road, this is a top 10 team. I don't care if they have three losses.
Yeah, I mean, well, we know one thing's for sure. At least as it
That's a big
stands right
if, by the
now.
way. I'm fully aware they could fall on their faces and Napier's out the door halfway through the season.
Well, as it stands right now, we know that Napier will be returning in 2025. Another gauntlet scheduled there. Obviously, the task will be tall once again. Who will be returning from this Gator team next year? Who are they going to bring in? A lot of crucial things they're going to have to do in the offseason. Still have a couple of big games left that they want to make a bowl game. And ultimately, um, you go into the next season with them. If it doesn't work out, at least the bright side there is the buyouts less, right? So it's like okay, but without a doubt, this team has turned. This team has definitely made improvements as the year has gone on. The way this season started could not have gone worse. But Lagway's now taken over as the QB. You've seen the growth there, and he's been spectacular. And now we're going to try to roll with him and see what this Gator team can be here in the next couple of years.
Yes, we will. The Florida Gators beat LSU at home. They host Ole Miss next week. Noon kickoff against the Lane Train, the guy who, for a while, might have been speculated to be the Gators head coach next season, but we know that's no longer the case. Still, because of that storyline, it's going to make it for a fantastic game, but we will
Oh,
get to that. What was
yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's going to be huge because Napier's got to have a chip on his shoulder going against the guy
Yeah.
on the other sideline that a lot of this fan base has been saying for most of the year. This should be our
Is the
coach.
successor.
Lane Kiffin, you need to be at University of Florida. Napier, it's like this. If there's a game that he wants to win more, like this, there should be a game that he wants to win more than this one.
In this one, oh, if he beats Lane Kiffin, if he goes out there and it's like, hey, I beat the guy that you wanted to replace my ass.
Make
How
us all
about how about that?
make everyone look silly. Make everyone look silly. He's got the opportunity to do that for sure.
Yeah, but we will touch base on that again next week after the game. But until then, I'm Harrison. That's Josh. This is the Awkward Sports Podcast, and we will see you next time. Peace.